Tom, if you don't mind, I'd like to lay out a couple things for Marco and also for our listeners here real quick about AIP and our history concerning this issue of Obama's natural-born status.
Absolutely.
Clear back in 2008, pretty early on, some of our leaders started to raise questions about Obama's citizenship, and and frankly, McCain's as well. And we won't get into that, but there were certainly problems enough with McCain's status that they had to go all the way to the extent of getting a resolution in the U.S. Senate in support of him, even though I don't agree with the factual nature of that resolution and all of that. But in any case, some of our top leaders, they sued to try and get California in particular to do what it has done in the past, which is if somebody can't provide the proof that they meet the simple constitutional requirements to be president, that they're thrown off the ballot. And so Dr. Keyes, who was our 2008 presidential nominee, and our state party chairman and some others sued. And as most everyone on this call knows, that didn't ultimately go too well. A couple of those cases actually are still under appeal. But it's been a sorry, ugly thing. The courts have just simply not allowed these questions to be dealt with. And the door has been closed on every front. I guess that's one of the reasons, since the Congress wouldn't deal with it when they counted the electoral votes, not one of the members of Congress would, since the courts wouldn't deal with it. The way I look at it, that's one of the things that led to a situation where someone like Colonel Lakin felt the need to do what he did. So, from the beginning, our public position has been, we don't know if Barack Obama is a natural-born citizen. We just simply don't know. We haven't made any claims that he's not. Our position has been that the burden of proof is on him. The burden of proof is on the job applicant, not anybody else. You can't ask the American people to prove a negative, because you can't do that. We can't prove it one way or another at this point. We don't have enough information. And my understanding originally, that's all Lieutenant Colonel Lakin sought, was the documentation that he actually a lawful sitting president of the United States.
That's correct, Tom. And Marco told me before the call that he only has a limited amount of time to be with us tonight. So if I may, that's why I tried to lay out a little highlight foundation at the beginning in case there was anybody listening that had not kept up with the news, although, there's a saying, what do you live in a cave? Because it's pretty much common knowledge these days. So, Marco, since Colonel Lakin went to Leavenworth yesterday and was processed into the disciplinary barracks there and has been assigned an inmate number, et cetera, have you heard any news since then? Has there been any updates in the last day and a half?
Well, that's a very good question. Let me back it up a little bit and give you guys a timeline. So Thursday, a week ago, of course, he was convicted. He was given about 20 minutes to change into his civilian uniform, and then he was taken. From that point until today, nobody officially heard where he was. Now, some of that was the weekend, some of it was just military bureaucracy, but even his wife, Peely, who I've spoken to almost every day now, had no information about his whereabouts until this afternoon.
If I may interrupt for a moment, Marco, for the benefit of the listeners' background, Peely Lakin is a pediatrician in her own right who gave up her medical practice to take care of their 3 children. So
correct.
There's a lot at stake here for the Lakin family.
Right. So today we discovered where he was yesterday afternoon, and as many of you may know, and it's on already hundreds of websites, there is an address and a way to mail things to him, and we are hoping that over the next few days he gets thousands and thousands of letters. there's very clear instructions on the website. You really, all you can mail is a letter. No packages, no food, no magazines. But that's where we want to do, and overwhelm Leavenworth with that. So basically today she finally got a call from the gentleman who's handling the intake, and apparently it's a 5-day process. So he really got started yesterday, and he has to do training courses in there. It's almost like being back in the Army, but you're in prison apparently. They said she probably will not be able to speak to him until Friday or Monday. Now, that's a little bit incredulous to me, particularly on a high-profile case like this. So that's where he is now, and she was very pleased. I spoke to her this afternoon, pleased to hear that he was safe. Now, we've also heard ad hoc. I mean, you remember, this is just second because we don't know anyone, but apparently we heard from a woman whose husband is involved at the prison and said that he was warmly received by the people there and well cared for. And apparently, as many of you know, there are people throughout the military, way many more than will ever actually say it live, that are completely 100% as curious as Terry is. So.
Absolutely. I can tell you from some degree of experience, I was a law enforcement supervisor in the Air Force, and one of my compadres when I was stationed at one base volunteered for duty at Leavenworth, and they take their duty very seriously, and people are very much more so than the population overall behind the Constitution, and a man like Colonel Lakin would get a lot of respect behind those bars.
Now, I want to clarify one point. Those of you who have kept up with it, by the way, a couple of things that Tom didn't say. So I met 10 months ago, I got a call from a friend of mine who is a good friend of Ducky Hemingway's, and you guys who plugged around Safeguard know her name. She's the main voice, and a feisty one at that, for Safeguard Our Constitution, and said, we have this interesting case coming up. We need someone to do technology support. So I got involved early on, and I built and designed the Safeguard Our Constitution site, which I still am the webmaster for. I built and designed the Terry Lakin Action Fund site. Then I was asked a few weeks ago, right before before this was imminent, to join the trust as a trustee and to be the administrative trustee. So I have a responsibility to run the trust fund and make decisions on its behalf, along with the two other trustees, who is Terry's brother, Greg, and his brother-in-law, Peely's brother. So I had no idea what an adventure this would be, because along the way I've had met a huge number of great people. Got to spend 4 hours with Alan Keyes one night talking with Terry, which was a very interesting night. Alan Keyes is a crazy cool guy, and I've actually met him before. So it's been quite a fascinating 10 months, and no idea that I would get this involved in this case. Now, having said that, a lot of people are questioning. In fact, any of you who have plugged around CAFlog and a lot of their blogs, Terry got blasted by even a lot of supporters for pleading guilty. So let's discuss that, because this is very important. So one thing that Neil Puckett explained to me so clearly that I was just having a hard time getting a handle on. So let's
for the listeners, that's the attorney, right?
So there are two attorneys, Paul Jensen and Neil Puckett. So let's just address that quickly, because I want you people who are sensible, clear thinkers to help quell a lot of the baloney that's out there. First of all, Paul Jensen has been called a million names in the blogs, including the dog bite attorney and all kinds of other things. I can tell you without any hesitation that Paul Jensen not only is a Christian but a dedicated attorney who we did raise a lot of money through Safeguard, and almost all of it went back into Terry's case, with the exception of professional services on my part and Ducky's, which was a very small part of that money. A lot of people have, said that he was, deceiving them. Well, we didn't, and that almost all that money went into Terry's case. However, Terry has spent over $180,000 of his own money on this case. You guys need to know that. Money that he took out of his own savings and his own resources. Now, and of course, he's out for 6 months, and who knows what happens after that. So Paul Jensen was a dedicated, hardworking attorney, and his strategy proved to be good, and Neil Puckett essentially followed the same thing. We chose early on not to make Terry's case a huge birther pool, to focus on the single issue, which is constitutional eligibility. All right? Now, the second thing that Neil, because I got to spend a lot of time with Neil Puckett at the hearing, because I was there one whole day, he explained to me, and it's something that was very vague, and a lot of you will see this, that the way our laws are written, because Barack Obama was sworn in as president, he is indeed the legal president, and His orders are lawful. Now, that's hard to understand. He also went on to explain to me that in our Army and the way our laws are written, that when an officer is sworn into the position, the officer is immediately given the full right to issue orders regardless of who is above him. Now, if you think about that, it kind of has to be that way. In fact, it's been one of the hallmarks of our military, reading World War II books. You know, the Germans were befuddled by the U.S. troops who could just regroup and pick up with the next highest rank and keep going, where the German army just fell apart without leadership, right? So we've always had highly distributed leadership in our country, from the president right down to a homeowners association, right down to a neighborhood group. It's the hallmark of representative government, not democracy, representative government, right? So that's why Terry was found guilty legally. So why did he plead guilty? Okay, at that point, when he went to trial, there was no question about it. He was going to prison, okay? And so Neil Puckett did what Neil was supposed to do, is protect his client. You need to understand that Terry could, at the end, have had up to 4 years of imprisonment. And when you go above 6 months, you go into hard labor. Neil did everything he could do to minimize Terry's punishment and to make it as quick and simple as possible for him, because we knew he was going to be convicted, because he did indeed break the law. So let's talk about that. Terry, after 2 years, as most of you know, he did every normal procedural thing he could do to get verification of Barack Obama's eligibility to hold the office of Commander-in-Chief. It was exhausting. He did it all. So a lot of it's on Safeguard. There's a lot of other documents we didn't put up because there just was nothing to read. It's just page after page of mumbo-jumbo stuff. At that point, he felt so strongly about it, as you know, those of you who've seen the video, that he chose to disobey a direct order to deploy and a direct order from his superior to meet to discuss it. It was the missing movement that was the greatest punishment, and he pled innocent to that because of a confusion in orders. He pled guilty to the charges of the second point, but they found him guilty on both. Now, it is a travesty. It is an absolute travesty. So let's say the critics who have pounded Terry, and a lot of conservative people have hammered Ducky's website. Believe me, Ducky Hemingway is a smart lady who worked on the Hill for 20 years, but she said, any words I didn't know, I now know. You would not believe the vitriolic email that she gets. It is off the scale. However, most of it is very positive. So I'm asking you, your group, you people who are clear thinking and sensible about this stuff, that Terry accomplished a huge amount. Yes, some people wanted him to go there and scream and yell and run around and say, I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take this anymore, But that's not Terry Lakin. What you see on that video is Terry Lakin. He is a humble, quiet, soft-spoken guy. And when I shot that first video, and I had plans to do something much edgier. Once I met Terry the first time, I'm like, no, Paul, we're just doing a straight shot, eyes in the camera, center shot, because that's who Terry is. And that video has been viewed over 400,000 times, as you know. Now, so what did Terry accomplish? Well, he accomplished a huge amount of stuff. He brought this into the mainstream. If you search on Google, he is everywhere. He has completely overwhelmed this space. He brought legitimacy to this in the media. It became the staple of late-night jokes. You probably have all seen that Jay Leno clip. It looks like Barack Obama's in trouble. Even the Democrats are asking for his birth certificate, which is just incredibly funny. If you haven't seen it, just search on. It's very funny. Major publications have covered this. WorldNet Daily has just pounded on this. Lots of other mainstream publications have hit this. And here's what it comes down to. It doesn't matter whether Terry pled guilty or not. It doesn't matter that he didn't stand up and run around naked and scream and yell. All that matters is he continues to bring this and has given us now another vehicle to keep pounding this point that it is ludicrous that the President of the United States is not willing to show us a $5 document that every U.S. citizen possesses. Now, you could almost excuse this if we were talking about legalized drug abuse, legalized prostitution, even abortion, which is black and white to me, but it does have a 20-year legal morass around it. Or we were talking about some secret tattoo he got in college. We don't even want to see that. We just want to see this stupid document that my daughter had to show twice when she got her learner's permit here in Maryland. And so that is the issue. And it is a crime that the nation's being put through this. At the very least, It's a cruel joke, and at the worst, it's one of the biggest constitutional crises we have ever seen. So Terry has done a huge amount, and people need to appreciate that. He's spent a ton of his own money, who knows how much emotional energy. His parents are livid about this. They are lifelong Democrats. His other brother is livid about this, wouldn't even shake Ducky's hand at the trial. His brother Greg, of course, is very much on his side. Now, I'll tell you something you didn't hear anywhere in the press. On Thursday, the prosecution played the video that's on YouTube, the first video, and the entire courtroom stood up, almost everybody, and a standing ovation for 2 or 3 minutes. And the judge really couldn't stop it.
Oh my!
It was very, very cool. So I'm just saying to all of you, Terry needs support. He needs response. We need you guys to make sure you keep up to date on Safeguard Our Constitution and the Terry Lakin Action Fund websites, which both will continue to contain, pertinent information, and continue to work this issue. Someone, sooner or later, is going to get it. Somebody's going to stand up and say, there's something amiss here. And I can't believe it hasn't been done, and I'm sure you can't either. So that's it. Now, Tom, I forwarded you a URL just a few minutes ago. Did you get it?
I'm not at my computer, but I will get back to my computer and check.
Okay, well,
Marco, I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for supporting Colonel Lakin in the various ways that you have so far. And I want to ask you, where do you think it goes from here? In other words, right now, as far as physical needs are concerned, when I got out of the Air Force, I worked in a civilian jail for a while, and there was a saying, 3 hots and a cot. So regardless of what people think of the issue itself, and of course I believe that most of the people on this call are 100% behind Lieutenant Colonel Terry Lakin.
There's a question in the chat room?
For the most part, he has 3 hots and a cot right now, but what about his family?
Well, so
what can we do to help his family?
Right now, they're not in any danger immediately, but I'm not really privy to their personal finances. But you can imagine Terry is a colonel. He's got a reasonable salary. You guys pretty much know what colonels are. He was a GS or whatever, not GS, whatever his rating is. They've been frugal. His wife worked for a while before they were married, before they had children. But anybody who forks out $180,000, $200,000 out of a standard middle income, is going to be brutal. The best thing people can do right now is continue to support the Action Fund. We now have recurring giving up there as well, a monthly giving. I don't care if it's $1, $5, $10. Just encourage everybody to support that. That money will go directly to defray any any legal expenses and any immediate needs that Peely may have in the fund. The second thing, of course, is to continue to bring sensibility to this. People who get all upset about Terry pleading guilty say, who cares? The issue is constitutional eligibility, and the fact that if we're so willing to give up this constitutional statement, then what happens when we get to freedom of the press or unreasonable seizure and search or freedom of religion or a million other things? Why are we letting this go? This has served us so well for 240 years, completely sensible clause to absolutely make certain that the president had the highest probability of being loyal to the country, and we are so ready to let this slip. That is just a crying shame, folks.
Gentlemen, hang on just a second, Tom. Maureen has a question from someone in the chat room.
Sure.
Yeah, someone was wondering why his wife wasn't in court.
Well, there are a couple of issues. Peely is a brilliant, beautiful, elegant woman with 3 beautiful young children. And she is behind Terry 100%, but this whole thing, you can imagine, was a bit overwhelming for her. And she felt like the best place for her those 3 days was with her children, because she had discussed this and she saw Terry every night, and just felt the best place for her was to be home with her children, and not to leave them out there in case they were afraid or so forth. And that was her choice. She's also not a public woman. I mean, she does not want to be in the public, and I'll tell you, I was there all day Tuesday, and essentially just basically was Terry's shield. I mean, whenever we moved out, it wasn't that people were rude or anything. He was just very stressed out, and So whenever they dismissed us, Neil and Terry and Greg and I would just kind of walk Terry out pretty quickly into the defense room. So, but Terry was also very, very amiable and spent a lot of time talking to people. People drove from Georgia, Arkansas, Texas. It was amazing, and so that's why she wasn't there. And I think you could all understand that.
That's a good reason, yes.
Okay. Any other questions from the chat room, Maureen?
No, not really. There was one early. Mr. Shulin said that he had pleaded to 3 charges. Is that right?
Well, there were. I don't have the exact. There were 2 groups of charges, and the second one had 3 points, and they all involved him missing meetings with superiors, and he pled guilty to all those because he was guilty. I mean, He just missed the meetings. The missing movement charge, which was the first one, which means he didn't get on a physical means of conveyance when ordered to, was the one that they were pleading innocent to because there was a confusion in orders. But in the end, the jury said, no, there was no confision. You just didn't pay attention, basically. But
I have a question. Sorry.
Sure.
I thought, when you said that he is lawfully the president, but if he's not constitutionally eligible to be the president of the U.S., then he can't be.
Well, I'm going to leave this to the attorneys, but the way Neil Puckett described it is the way the other laws that are around this is that when he is sworn in, he is the president. Now, what that means is that what a lot of people said, well, if he was impeached, then all these laws would retroact. They won't. According to Neil,
impeached because he isn't really the president.
No, he's impeached. See, this is what I'm saying. You got to be real careful about this. From you're thinking like I did.
Eligible.
Right.
If
the question is not
constitutionally eligible. I mean, if a fraud passes as a doctor and then they find out he's not a doctor, he's not a doctor.
That's right.
They don't have to take away his medical license.
We posted a story on Safeguard about that exact same thing as a contrast. But our point was they found out everything about this fraudulent doctor in like an hour. And we're like, well, why can't we find out anything about Barack Obama?
We could. Nobody just wants to.
Well, timing there's no statute of limitations here. Richard Nixon did what he did long, with the Watergate thing, long before he resigned. And Edwin Vieira, a brilliant attorney, had long explained it before Obama was elected.
Yeah. So the point is, I can't argue the legal parts with you. All I'm saying is, all of that is moot because the only issue is either prove you're constitutionally eligible or just step aside.
But you shouldn't acquiesce in that, and neither should you on the idea of the chain of. Had a long time with Alan Keyes. He's written brilliantly about the chain of command coming right down from the top.
Well, it does, and it absolutely corrupts the chain of command, no question about it. So, but the key is to drive this issue. It's like Tom Cruise,
absolutely.
Show me the money. Just show me the money. Right?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you, and thank Tom Kovach. God bless you, Tom, for what you're doing, setting up this whole thing.
Now, what I'd like to do, I sent Tom a URL, and I'm going to give you guys one complete advance here. We came up with some very, very funny T-shirts that are on Cafe Press. We just turned the site on about 10 minutes ago, and it's not even technically public. But I
saw them. They're hilarious.
So Tom's going to forward you the URL to the store right now, but I'll give you a tip. One of them says, birth certificates are like belly buttons. Everyone has one except apparently the president. And there's a funny picture there. And we hope you guys enjoy these, and I hope they just bring some levity to this issue that will continue to drive attention to it. So let me know.
All right. Somebody else have questions for Marco?
Okay, no other questions?
Floor's open, guys.
All right. Well, I would like to say then, Tom, if you have any questions directly for the foundation, to me, just forward them through Tom, and I can answer them kind of in batch, and we'll be glad to join another call, perhaps get Greg on next time as well. So.
Hi, this is Jay from Hawaii. I just got on the call not too long ago, and I missed the verdict.
He was found guilty on all charges, including the one he pled innocent to, and was charged with 6 months in prison, loss of rank and position, and loss of all benefits and pay.
Wow.
And he's in Leavenworth as we speak.
You know, Marco, this is Greg from Massachusetts. There's a VFW in the city that I live in, Brockton, and I went down there many months ago, and nobody wanted to listen about the eligibility issue of the supposed commander-in-chief. I think I can get down there. Maybe I'll get a little more currency out of this with Terry Lakin.
Yeah, well, wear one of the shirts that Tom's going to send you, and you'll get lots of attention.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you guys, and by the way, I didn't mention this. I've worked in Maryland. I've worked Republican politics for 17 years for Senator Nancy Jacobs, who's a straight-down conservative, pro-life, pro-gun, pro-business candidate, great candidate. I love her to death. Along the way, I've worked for Andy Harris and a number of other conservative candidates, and I met some of your candidates in Maryland this year, and I'm very pleased to see what you guys are doing. So thank you.
All right. Excellent. Thank you very much, Marco.
Everybody have a good evening and best wishes for the Christmas season.
You too.
Right.